All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome on into the Auburn Daily Show, episode 11 of the Auburn Daily Show. Lance Dawe here with you, going to be recapping Auburn football spring game. It was more interesting than last year's. I think you could definitely say that. And while I would say that the Brian Harsin era so far we've not had a particularly interesting spring game so far. I would say that last Saturday. It was certainly more entertaining, despite to the two teams scoring a combined point less than last season. 10-9 was the final score. We're going to go over what we saw, kind of some thoughts. Obviously, we're going to talk about the quarterback battle. I know that's on a lot of people's minds, and overall, it was definitely. I thought it was more entertaining, like I said, than last year. And the weather was absolutely phenomenal. Outside of the wind, of course, Auburn wasn't really kicking a lot of field goals. Outside of I believe Marshall Myers was the one that whiffed on a field goal. But let's go ahead and get into it here. The place I wanted to start that I thought was the most interesting was Robby Ashford. Let's go ahead and get it out of the way. Let's talk about what Robby Ashford did for the Tigers on Saturday. Man, I thought he looked really good. I honestly thought that for a kid that's not really been in the system for a very long time and is still trying to get his feet wet and is only, essentially been a backup his entire career, collegiate career, and he's not really gotten a chance to actually thrive in any in-game situations outside of spring games. I mean, he looked really, really comfortable. You look at his statistics here, 11 of 13 with Team Tigers for 127 yards passing. That's an 85% completion percentage. And then for Team Auburn, I believe, if I can pull it up here real quick, he was 1 of 3 for 5 yards. I see underrated in the chat. What's going on, man? War Eagle, dude. Glad that you're here. I really enjoy getting to talk to chat, and I really do hope by the time the season rolls around, we're able to do some lives and we're able to actually kind of discuss post-game stuff. I think that's going to be a lot of fun. I could have gone live after A-Day, but I was actually at the game. But yeah, I think that I think Robby Ashford with Team Tigers looked really, really comfortable for a kid that's not really been there for a long time. Trey Lee in the chat. What's up, Trey? How you doing? Talking about Auburn's spring game, talking about how Robby Ashford performed for the Tigers this past Saturday. He looked comfortable, and something that he showed off that I thought was impressive is I know he's kind of the only dual threat quarterback on roster, but he showed his wheels, and I didn't necessarily expect to see that. It was something that I hadn't really thought about heading into this game. He's got a really strong arm, probably needs to work a little bit more on the accuracy. And something that I noticed watching the film back is I'm not a massive fan of his mechanics. Quite frankly, I'm not a huge fan of Finley's mechanics, nor am I a fan of Garner's either. But the problem with Ashford, and this may not end up being a problem if he ends up performing for the Tigers, is his windup. It takes a really, really long time for him to get to that point to release the football. Now, that may not be an issue in the fall, and this coaching staff may not hate that. Can he adjust that now after he's been playing college ball for a couple years? I don't know. Would love to see him speed up his release, though. That was probably the only nitpick outside of accuracy. I think his decision making was sound. I think he would tuck it and run whenever he needed to. I thought he looked really, really good. Will he start? I'm not sure. I think the quarterback battle, like Harsin said, it's not going to even get trimmed down until the first week of fall camp. Also underrated comment says Ashford is my quarterback number 2 behind Calzada right now. And honestly, I think that's a really good point, and that's something that I was going to go into. We did not get to see what Zach Calzada looks like because obviously the injury to his left shoulder. So I think that until we get to see Calzada fully healthy, practicing with the Tigers, and we get to hear about what he's doing, I don't think that we can jump to conclusions. Now we can project who we want to start, right? We can say, I think I want Robby Ashford to start, or I think I want Calzada or Finley, whoever it may be. But I don't think we can make any definitive conclusion, obviously, because even this coaching staff, I don't think they truly know who's going to be quarterback number 1. And, Calzada is a factor that we've not really gotten to see him. And I don't want to act like I'm criticizing the fan base, because I've certainly done this myself in the past. Is you get past spring and you get through the A-Day game and you head into the summer after seeing a really impressive performance from somebody that is battling for in a position group, might even be quarterback, and you say, I want that guy to be the guy at that position, right? Whether it be quarterback, running back, whatever it may be, is like that guy deserves more playing time because he played really well in the spring game, or he played really well throughout spring practice, according to reports. And you get to fall and you end up not seeing him at all, whether that may be legitimate or not, whether it be a good decision or a bad decision by the coaching staff. And so I just don't want to. I think while Ashford looked good, and I think that he definitely deserves praise for the way that he played on Saturday, I don't think that it would be fair to say, okay, well, then he is the definitive starter, right? Or he should be that guy at this position after seeing just one spring scrimmage, right? I think that you've got to be able to look at the big picture and say, well, TJ Finley's still going to be battling, which we'll talk about him in a second. And then Holden Gariner still going to be battling until I believe they'll eventually cut him out of the quarterback battle officially in fall camp. And then obviously Zach Calzada. I mean, there are a lot of different guys in this room that are legitimately competing. So I don't think just yet we can say definitively that one guy is going to win the job. Even though, again, Ashford looks like he looked a lot better than I expected him to. TJ Finley's numbers: 11 of 19 for 137 yards, 1 touchdown. And technically that touchdown should not have stood. In my opinion, it was a drop by Malcolm Johnson Jr., but they let it go anyway. You know what? That's fine. Whatever. 58% completion percentage is what TJ Finley had. And I think the big thing that we are looking forward to this spring, I think we're also looking forward to it in the fall during spring practices, hearing how Finley has worked on his accuracy issues. It was obviously during the final 4 games of the season last year, or final 3 or 4. It was an issue with Finley, and I think that it's really important to see him grow, throwing the football accurately. And we got to hear reports during spring practice about how, he's actually working on it. We got to see some videos from a couple different beat writers. Like, he looks like the most polished passer out there, but when you got into the game, when you got into the scrimmage, was not the most accurate quarterback. Now, I believe he was like 7 or 8 or something like that to start the game. I may be completely wrong, but he was playing well to start. And then he had a drive where he went 1 for 5. There were a couple of drops that aided in that. And then after that point, you didn't really get to see any consistency from TJ Finley. And quite frankly, he had 2 passes that should have been intercepted, and one of them I think could have potentially been a pick 6. Marquise Gilbert, JUCO safety, dropped an interception that 1,000% should have been a caught interception. And then I don't remember if it was Desmond Tisdale or whoever it was that broke up a pass that could have potentially been an interception. Might have been Cameron Brown. But yeah, TJ Finley, the accuracy, I was not in love with. I will say this, though. He also had a dropped what could have potentially been a touchdown by Tavares Dawson. It's like you heard it all in the bowl game. It's like TJ Finley couldn't connect with Tavares Dawson on that wide open touchdown. It's like, well, the one time that he gives him an accurate pass, he drops it 9 times out of 10. And I believe that Zach Blackerby, Locked on Auburn podcast, said something similar. It's like 9 times out of 10 he catches that pass, and it's probably a touchdown. Underrated also comments here, said he was not pleased with the 8-minute quarters and the running clock. Live action like the Texas A&M game or Florida State game was more with live quarterback runs for scores. I agree. And there are different coaches throughout the country that like to run their spring games differently. For instance, Kentucky, they didn't have a 2-sided affair. It was literally just one team was offense, one team was defense, and it was a 32-0 final score because there was only one team running with the offense. It was just offense versus defense. It was a scrimmage type thing. And I agree. I do not like the running clock I would have much rather had something like Texas A&M had. And they had some highlights. They had some quarterbacks run it in. It was really entertaining. But I will say, while it would be nice to see that, I don't think that Brian Harson's the type of guy that's going to be bringing anything like that out anytime soon. And I don't mean that to kind of rain on the parade, because again, like I said, I want to see that, but I don't think he's going to really change. And something else I'll say that I did not like about the scrimmage or the A-Day game, and they did this last year, is the opening kickoffs. They would have the return team and even in the blockers in non-contact jerseys, but they would kick it off anyway, and they would let the return man run it back for a touchdown. Like, ooh, yay, how about that? But the thing is like, if they're not going to let them block or let them even perform, what's the point of lining up and kicking it off, right? It's just literally wasting time on an already shortened clock. And I probably would have been more okay with the running clock had they had 15-minute quarters and they just had a running clock for the entire second half. I think fans would have been fine with that, but I was not a fan of the kickoffs and how they've just wasted time. Now, I believe in the second half, whenever they did a kickoff, they did not run any time off the clock, which was great. But they did that last year for A-Day. And I believe it might have been the second drive. They actually didn't have a kick at all, which was great. But again, it feels like such a waste of time if you're not going to gain anything or learn anything from it. And if the whole point is to entertain the fans, I think that a lot of people would agree, at least ones that even have a sliver of knowledge about the game. It's just like that was a waste of time. But you know what? Overall, I really can't complain. The fact that they're even showing us anything, I think, is great. Underrated also comments and says, I can see Kaufman returning kickoff and punt returns like he did at Vanderbilt. I agree. Which player would you like to see back there with him? Nehemiah Pritchett, I think, is somebody that you could potentially see back there with him. Tank Bigsby, probably on kickoff returns as well. How much of him you see on kickoff returns, I don't know, considering Auburn's going to kind of want to keep him healthy. But yeah, Nehemiah Pritchett is probably somebody that I would stick back there with him. I'm trying to think of guys with speed. I'd have to go look through. Honestly, I'd have to sit down and go look through the roster. But yeah, I think Pritchett and Kaufman are two that immediately come to mind. I believe Kaufman, was it a punt return or a kick return that he scored against LSU against Vanderbilt? Either way, he is a legitimate return man, a very viable option for Auburn back there. So yeah, I agree, underrated. I think that he definitely could be a factor for the Tigers. And then also, I like potentially putting Pritchett back there as well. I mean, we got to see Pritchett. Didn't he return a field goal for a touchdown against Alabama State? I believe that he did. Anyway, let's see. What else do we have here on 8A? Wesley Steiner and Cam Riley. Okay, so I don't know how to necessarily feel about Auburn's linebacking core heading into 2022. You've got Owen Papo, right? And if he's healthy, knock on wood, he'll be able to be the front runner for that defense, and he's going to be able to rack up some tackles. Trey Lee and I actually had a conversation just a few days ago, 5 bold predictions for Auburn football in 2022. Trey Lee believes that Papo will lead the SEC in tackles this upcoming season as a bold prediction, and he kind of explained why. It's like, well, Auburn doesn't really have a ton of depth at linebacker, and then also he's just an athletic freak. Papo can do a lot of different things for you. I'm excited about him. But it's the guys outside of him that I'm really concerned about. When you look at Cam Riley and Wesley Steiner, they've been in this system for a couple of years now. I believe Cam Riley's like something ridiculous, like 6'5", just an absolute unit, as is Ekaluyota. Shout out to Locked On Auburn listeners that get that joke. But after seeing the way that they played in the spring game, they were able to fill some holes and get some tackles, stopping the run. I was impressed, man. I was impressed with what they did. 6 tackles for Wesley Steiner, 5 for Cam Riley. He got a sack, tackle for loss. I think that Auburn's linebacker depth is in good hands. And also, you have to think about Eugene Asante, the North Carolina transfer. He's going to be playing with the Tigers this season. I would assume that Asante and Papo will be the 2 starting linebackers, unless Riley or Steiner happens to take Asante's role or Papo's not healthy. But yeah, I'm curious to see what this linebacking core looks like in 2022. And I was pleased to see the guys that I expected to stepping up in a scrimmage. Now, you can also say, it's like, well, you can't really take away a lot from a spring game, right? It's like the offense is vanilla, the defense is vanilla. You're not really trying to show a ton. You're just trying to give the fans something to be entertained by. And it's so, can you really take what they contributed seriously? I think you can a little bit. I think you can a little bit. You just have to be pleased that in this type of setting they were able to step up and they were able to deliver whenever they were asked to. Let's see. Something that I thought was interesting, and I think this just kind of is the nature of the spring game, or the nature of the situation, I should say. Auburn tried to get Tank Bigsby touches in the passing game, and it's partially for a couple reasons. First, the offensive line is severely injured right now, and they've got some guys out, and I don't think that they were going to be able to really block for a very long time on Saturday. Auburn didn't really attempt to do anything downfield except for just a couple plays, and they really tried to stick with the short and intermediate stuff. We'll get to that later. But it was partially because the offensive line was injured, and it's also partially because I feared that the run blocking, I want it to take a big step this year. I want Auburn to be able to develop running the football with Tank Bigsby. That's the identity that Brian Harsin wants to establish. I just don't know if they can, even with all the experience they have. I don't think they're going to be able to the level that they want to. Auburn's offensive line hasn't been able to do that for quite some time now, and that's due in part to the fact that Auburn hasn't really recruited very well in the trenches. But yeah, I think that it was creative the way that they were able to get the ball to Tank Bigsby in space. I liked what they did with some of the swing passes, and then they also lined him up as a receiver. And I believe he dropped what would have been a catchable ball down the right sideline. It was actually a good throw by Finley, in my opinion. But they've got to be able, I think, this season, they've got to be able to establish that ground game. And the offensive line, say what you want about it. I don't think you could really take a ton away from the spring game, considering that they are severely injured. But I want to see them in the fall when they're healthy, sort of start to establish that in fall camp. Underrated also comments. My concern comes in the pass rush after Leota and Hall. Do the freshmen step up? Looking to see who Harsin goes after in the portal. Yeah, the defensive line, I really like the two starters that we have as far as pass rushers go. I really like those two guys, Eku Leota and Derek Hall. But that's a good question. Do Auburn's freshmen step up? And I believe Dylan Brooks in this game, he had a few tackles as well. He's going to be somebody interesting to watch out for on the edge. Caleb Wooden also is probably going to be playing on the edge a little bit, had one tackle for loss in the spring game as well. But yeah, Auburn's going to have some freshmen step up. And I'll say this, the defensive line as a whole, I'm excited about. I'm really excited to see Jason Jones, Marcus Harris, Jeffrey Mba. I'm excited to see those guys on the interior. And part of the reason that Auburn's scheme, I think, failed consistently last year was the fact that they weren't able to generate a consistent pass rush. And we got to see that incredibly frustrating scheme in really, really tight moments and in crucial games. Like you look at the Mississippi State and the Penn State game, I think are two prime examples of that. Auburn not able to generate pressure, and the defensive line kind of failing them at different points. But I will say, I don't think Auburn's pass rush is bad. I just think they need to send more guys more frequently. But I think it is a valid concern. Just like, what does Auburn's depth look like at that position? I have faith, but I think that it's perfectly understandable to see or to think that Auburn could struggle a little bit. Also, will Auburn go after some edge rushers in the portal? We'll have to see. We'll have to see. Speaking of, by the way, the defensive scheme, wanted to talk about this for a second. So I mentioned the short and intermediate routes earlier, right? I mentioned that the defense didn't really have the chance to go after Auburn consistently. And I think that this is something that you have to be worried about. So I talked about last season how Auburn did struggle in games against Penn State, Mississippi State, where teams were just carving them up with the short to intermediate stuff. Auburn couldn't really get a pass rush going, and their defensive backfield was just eaten alive. And we got to see Auburn's quarterbacks just kind of dink and dunk a little bit. I believe Holden Garner and Robby Ashford both finished with 75% completion percentage. which, by the way, if the offense has a quarterback that's completing 70-ish% of his passes, it's not going to happen. But if it does, just a hypothetical here. If it does, I'm very excited about that. But a question that I think you could have into this coming into the season is, will Auburn have opponents attack them the way that Auburn's offense attacked them in the spring game? Will the defense continue to give up short and intermediate passes, easy throws and catches? Will they give up that high completion percentage? Will they not be able to get off the field on third down? I think that's a very legitimate question. After watching the way Auburn was like, so they're dinking and dunking, they're throwing to the tight ends, they're throwing to these receivers on these short routes. Hey, what does this defense look like next year? Because everybody wants to say that, the defense will be just fine. And I believe it will to an extent. In fact, I think that there's definitely opportunity for it to be even better than it was last season. But there is that fear that the same issues that Auburn had last year are going to come back into play this year in games where Auburn really needs to get a signature win. I think you could look at that Penn State game week 3. I think you could look at Penn State, Missouri, and LSU all back-to-back games early on in the season where Auburn needs to be able to make a stand and win a game. They got to be able to play a little bit of defense, a little bit of pass defense, that is. Underrated also says the fan base is also mainly concerned on the offensive line. There were names in the portal. Playing time is no issue, but it comes down to if they want to come to the Plains. Fans never factor that in. I think that's a good point. You also have to think about NIL and what Auburn's willing to do for some of these kids in the portal. If I'm a 5-star, like if I'm the kid from Georgia, I believe it's Mims, and he's searching for an NIL deal right now. If he wants to go to a place that's going to give him some of that money, I mean, is Auburn at the top of his list, especially considering he played for a rival for a little bit? I don't know. So I think that you have to factor in the facts like, well, maybe he doesn't really want to go to Auburn. And also, well, maybe there's some other schools that can offer him a better NIL deal than the Tigers can. And I think underrated is right. There were offensive linemen in the portal. There were some names, even some like 3-stars from like Western Kentucky and places like that Auburn couldn't get to commit. Or at least, I don't know if they were looking at him hard, but I think that the 2 offensive linemen that Georgia's had recently enter the portal, I think Auburn has to at least pursue them a little bit just to see what's going on there, what they're interested in, what their play style is, because I think Auburn really needs some help in the trenches. I don't think a lot of people would disagree with that. But like Underrated said, there was opportunity for Auburn to get some guys, but they weren't able to land them. Now, will we see them potentially land some guys before fall camp? I hope we do. I really hope we do. Underrated also says Sean Jackson is going to be a beast in the backfield, man. Some of the runs that he had, he is a very, very hard runner. I can understand why this program gave him a scholarship. Really, really love the way that Sean Jackson runs. Pull up his stats here real quick. Had 6 attempts for 23 yards, so averaged a little under 4 yards a carry with one team, and I'll pull up his stats on the other. He had 1 attempt for 3 yards on the other team. I would really like to see in short yardage situations if Jarquez Hunter, even if Jarquez Hunter is available, I want to see if there's a situation in the Mercer game or the San Jose State game where Auburn's up by 3 scores. First half, second half, doesn't matter. They're up by 14-21. I want to see in a short yardage situation, Auburn put in Sean Jackson and let him see if he could pick it up. I believe he can. He's a really, really physical guy. Kind of reminds me of Cameron Petway. I think Cameron Petway had a little bit more speed, but it's that bruiser back that Auburn needs. They need somebody that's really physical. Tank Bigsby will run you over, but he also will prefer to get around you as well. Jarquez Hunter, very physical, very hard-hitting, but I love what Sean Jackson brings to this backfield. I think he could be utilized well in short yardage situations. The reason I say put him in for the Mercer or San Jose State game is because I believe he could prove himself. I really do believe he could prove himself. And by the time that you get to an LSU or an Ole Miss on the road and you need somebody to pick it up and you want to kind of throw Ole Miss off their game, you want to kind of throw some new personnel in at them, put in Sean Jackson on 3rd and 1. See what happens. I would have faith that he could go in and he could potentially pick it up. I wanted to see a little bit more out of him during the spring game, but again, to go back to what we were talking about with the offensive line, not the healthiest right now. The run game It's definitely going to be a little bit limited. All right, let's see. Is there anything else that I wanted to cover for A-Day? Powell Gordon, freshman for Auburn linebacker. I thought he played well, had a really nice tackle in the open field. Brandon Frazier, who has been sitting in the depth chart at tight end for Auburn, just a massive human being, had 5 receptions for 42 yards, and I believe all 5 of those catches came on the final drive. Tyler Fromm, Luke Deal, John Samuel Schenker. Auburn had a lot of different tight ends get involved. They also lined up Landon King at wide receiver, and he just mossed a defender at the very end of the game. A little bit underthrown by Holden Garner, but I like the throw and catch. Overall, again, like I said at the beginning, a more entertaining spring game than last year. But I'm eager to see this team develop just a little bit more. Underrated also says, does Auburn have any updates on NIL? Need to take lessons for Texas NIL for offensive line. That would definitely make recruiting waves. Auburn's got that Auburn NIL program, right? I don't know a ton about it. I know that there are a lot of players that are very pleased with the Auburn NIL program that they've got going on. I'm curious to see what Auburn does to kind of expand on that. Because you're right, I definitely think that it's going to be an attraction, not just for transfers, but also for recruits, period. Right? Of course, I mean, you're talking about competing with Texas NIL. I mean, you look at Texas and Texas A&M, there's a reason that A&M signed the best class of all time this past season. And I'm not saying they were doing anything nefarious. I'm just saying there's a lot of NIL money to go around. That oil money in Texas is legit. I'll just say that. So would Auburn ever be in the same sphere as a place like Texas or Texas A&M? I don't know, but they could definitely work their way up to at least competing with them. Does Auburn expand on that? I don't know. As far as updates on NIL, I just know that they've got that program and they're trying to build on it and they're trying to make it more well-known. I don't think Auburn is behind the curve right now on NIL. I think they jumped on it, and I think they're doing some good things. All right, let's see. What else did I want to talk about? Oh, yeah, okay. So moving on from the spring game, we may come back to it in a second if y'all want to continue to talk about it, but Terrance Love, a 4-star safety, committed to the Tigers on Sunday. For me, this was out of the blue. I was not paying attention to this. I knew that he had a couple crystal balls being thrown his way on 24/7 Sports, but I did not know that he was announcing his commitment on Sunday. Again, a 4-star safety announced his decision to come play for the Tigers on Sunday afternoon, according to his social media. He will join offensive lineman Braden Joyner, in Auburn's 2023 class. I believe on Rivals, Auburn moved up to like 26th nationally in recruiting rankings. 4 stars, in Auburn's 2023 class. Never complain about a 4-star. You'll take them every single time. Love is currently attending Langston Hughes High School in Fairburn, Georgia. He's listed at 6'2", 195 pounds, like the size there. And he received a ton of offers from a lot of different really high-level programs, including Alabama, Georgia, Texas A&M, LSU, Florida, Michigan State, Miami, Florida State, Oregon. The list goes on, but those were some of the notable ones that I had written down over at auburndaily.com. Number 182 overall prospect, according to 24/7 Sports. He's the 16th best safety in the 2023 recruiting class and the number 17 player out of the state of Georgia. Get a top 20 player out of the state of Georgia. I'm very happy with that. Again, you will never complain about a mid to high 4-star. Very, very excited about this guy. Auburn needs some depth at that position. And I believe we're going to talk about it on tomorrow's show, just places that Auburn needs to recruit this next recruiting cycle, and then also places that Auburn needs to hit the portal for, like different position groups. And safety is one of them. Now that Donovan Kaufman and who is the guy that's going to be playing with him at that spot? I believe Caden Bridges is going to be a depth piece. Gosh, I'd have to go pull it up. Marquise Gilbert will also be competing for that spot. But I want to see Auburn kind of build up a little bit more depth there, and this is definitely a talented guy that I think is going to step in. And I don't know if he's going to contribute year one. I just know that he's athletic and he's got some length, and I'm excited about it. You can go and read what he had to say over at auburndaily.com. Thank God, thanked his family, thanked his coaches. He talked about how initially, he didn't really want to play football. And then after a few years, he realized I'm actually pretty good at this thing. And so he applied himself to it. And he has now decided for the next 3 to 4 seasons that he's going to go play for Auburn University. Really excited to see Terrance Love come commit to the Tigers. All right, let's see. Is there anything else we wanted to go over today? There is one more thing. Okay, this is something that I wanted to get to last Friday, but I didn't have a chance to get to. This is just a brief basketball topic, and if anybody else has got any comments on Auburn's spring game, I'd love to hear them. If you don't, that's cool. But Auburn basketball is going to be playing in the 2022 Cancun Challenge. The schedule was released last week, and I'll just kind of skim through the press release here. Blah blah blah. It's going to be in Cancun. Obviously, it's going to be in Mexico. I believe the tournament's going to start for some of these teams at home in the United States. For instance, Winthrop will play at Auburn on November 15th. Eastern Michigan will play at Bradley. Southern Miss will play at Liberty. Purdue Fort Wayne will play at Northwestern. Those are all games that are going to be in the U.S. And then after those games, and this is not part of the bracket. Then after that, you have 2 divisions. You have the Mayan division and the Riviera division. You're going to have Purdue Fort Wayne versus Eastern Michigan, Southern Miss versus Winthrop, and then Auburn's going to play Bradley in the Riviera division. And then Liberty's going to play Northwestern. The Bradley-Auburn loser will play Liberty or Northwestern's loser, and the Bradley-Auburn winner will play the Liberty-Northwestern winner. So it's a weird way that the bracket's set up, but I want to just briefly bring that up, as that's kind of what Auburn's non-conference tournament that they're going to be playing the basketball team. That's kind of what that looks like. They're going to play Bradley and either with Liberty or Northwestern, and then they get Purdue at home on the 15th. Kind of set that challenge up. Underrated also comments, locking down the state with the top talent for the 23 cycle. Outlets like the Auburn Blitz mentioned some concerns that Harsin hasn't as of yet visited high school coaches and players to grow relations. I've heard similar things as well. I'm not saying like, ooh, look at me, I've got sources. I've just heard similar things as well. It's really nice that he did have, I believe they held some type of event just a week or so ago with a bunch of different high school coaches, just to get them to come in and everybody gets to interact. I believe Kellen Moore, Dallas Cowboys offensive coordinator, was there as well. But I completely agree, and this is something that I talked about way back when on ESPN radio last year, just talking about how Auburn, they weren't able to this past cycle, but they're going to need to, especially given just how much talent the state of Alabama has in 2023. They've got to be able to establish some connections within the state. This is your home state. Go out and get some of this top talent, right? And we actually talked about it on this show. It was one of the first episodes, just talking about Auburn recruiting and expectations for Auburn football. We noted that Auburn, when you look at like the top 50 recruits in the state of Alabama, they've only got a couple that are leaning their way or have committed, and most of them are Florida, Georgia, or Alabama leans or commits. And I think that it's really, really important that Auburn's able to go after some of this 2023 talent. Now, you want to be able to have that longevity, right? In your own state. You want to be able to establish that. But you look at some of the names that are in this 2023 class, and Auburn has made the top 6 for a quarterback. I believe it's Christian or Christopher Vizina, I believe is his name. Yeah, Christopher Vizina. He's among the final schools there with Notre Dame, Ohio State, Georgia, and Auburn and Clemson. Christopher will be announcing his decision tomorrow at 3:15. So we're going to be able to talk about that on tomorrow's show if he commits to the Tigers. I believe he's a Clemson lean. I might be mistaken there. But gosh, Auburn's got to be able to pick up somebody like him in this year's class. I think that it's very important that Auburn begins to establish themselves on the recruiting trail within their home state. I think that's very, very important. All right. Anything else we want to note here? Underrated also says, especially getting the players Alabama doesn't get, if not flip them. Exactly. You can't have I understand Georgia coming in and taking some of the 5 stars, Now, you don't want that to happen, but I understand it happening. But you can't have places like Texas or Florida or whoever it may be, and I could go pull it up just to run down the list, but like the players that Alabama is not getting, Auburn's got to be able to at least get in contention or pick some of them up. It's your home state. You are battling it out within your own state with only one other program. Obviously, there are external factors like Georgia and Florida that are going to contribute to the struggle there. But you should be second in line, if not first, for some of these recruits, right? You got to be able to establish your in-state recruiting. And I think the deal with Harsin last year is like, well, he's a national recruiter. He's got connections all over the place. He's going to be trying to get commitments from kids in Oregon and Idaho and California and all over the place in Michigan and in Indiana. Auburn was in the running, I believe, for a kid from Indiana, a 5-star linebacker committed to Notre Dame, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, Auburn's got to be able to establish themselves. I appreciate the national perspective, and I appreciate getting to pick up players that aren't from the South, going to be able to expand the horizons there. But with the talent that's in the South, specifically the state of Alabama last year, or this upcoming cycle, got to pick some of that up. Underrated also says, we've noticed Clemson taking top talent within the state for the past years. Yep, and I think that's potentially going to be the case with the 4-star quarterback Christopher Vizina. I believe that he's a Clemson lean. I may be completely off. He may commit to Auburn tomorrow, but I think he's committing to the Tigers from the Carolinas. And I again, you've got to be able to start to rein some of that in. You've got to rein some of that in. All right, I think that's it for today's episode, man. Covered everything we want to. Tomorrow, we're probably going to talk about Johnny Broome a little bit. He was on a visit to Auburn, Morehead State transfer. He was also going to be visiting Kentucky, I believe. Going to talk about him. Probably going to talk about some more Auburn football related things on the show. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you're not following us already on the socials, please make sure and do so at SI_Auburn on Twitter, and then at Auburn Daily over on Facebook. And then we live stream every single day at 4 p.m. Central on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. If you want to head over to the YouTube channel, if you're not already there, go ahead and subscribe. Would really appreciate that. Underrated says, keep your fingers crossed though. Yeah, dude. Knock on wood, he commits. I really, really hope that Christopher is able to commit, because that would be really entertaining to talk about that on tomorrow's show, because everybody likes quarterbacks. I always like to say the worst thing that could happen to Auburn is they get a quarterback commitment. Might also be the best thing, but everybody loves to talk about the quarterbacks, and I do too. All right, guys, I will catch you all tomorrow on another episode of the Auburn Daily Show. Have a great rest of your afternoon, everybody, and God bless.